Yo guys, Nukerev here once again, and today we're going to be looking at my completed Rank 10 Trains deck profile. This is a deck that I've been looking very much forward to doing, and happy Halloween, guys. Hope you guys are staying safe out there. So let's get started with the deck profile. First off, we're going to start off with Knight Express Knight. He's our one of our main playmakers. You can normal summon him without tributing, but his attack becomes 0. He's just going to be used as Xyz material, although when his effects are negated, he does have a nice 3000 attack without the need for tributing, so that's always a good thing to have. Next up, we have Heavy Freight Train Derricrane. He's also one of our main playmakers. Usually you'll normal summon Knight Express Knight, and if this guy is in your hand, you can special summon him. He can be special summoned from the hand every time a level 10 Earth Machine type monster is normal or special summoned, but only once per turn. And if he's detached from an Xyz monster to activate its effect, you can pop a card on the field. And I believe he's the only card that actually has that specific effect, which is really nice. Next up, this is going to be one of your main searchers, Ruffian Railcar. So when he's normal summoned, you can inflict 500 damage to your opponent, but you're never going to be using that effect, literally ever, because you lose your battle phase when you do it. But what you are going to be using him for is when he is in the graveyard, during the end phase, because he was sent there this turn, you can search your deck for a level 10 Earth Machine type monster. So your Derricranes and your Knight Express Knights. He's basically Skarm, if that helps to recognize him. Next up, we have 3 Malefic Cyber-End Dragons. This is a really good kind of a free special summon, and he's got a good beefy 4000 attack. Although if there is no field spell on the field, then he immediately gets destroyed, so always make sure that either your opponent has a field spell on the field, or you yourself have your field spell for this deck on the field. He can be used in a variety of different ways. I usually just like to go into Xyz monsters with this deck, but if you feel like that you need just a nice beefy free monster to get out on the field, that's totally fine. Next up we have 3 Exodius, the Ultimate Forbidden Lord. So this guy recycles your entire graveyard. You special summon him by shuffling all monsters in your graveyard back into the deck, which is a great way to reshuffle your Derricranes, your Ruffian Railcars, and really just any monster that you're either is getting destroyed on the field, or any monster that you're detaching from Xyz materials. This does shuffle back your Xyz monsters that get destroyed back into the extra deck as well, so he's just really a great recycler just all around. Next up, because I'm running a Kaiju variant of this deck, we're going to be running 3 Jizukuru, the Star-Destroying Kaiju. He is a level 10 light machine type. The fact that he's a machine type is also great because you do use limiter removal in this deck. So you can't special summon him unless your opponent already has a Kaiju, but as you'll see in a minute, we do have plenty of Kaijus to give our opponent, so he's not going to be the hardest thing to summon out. But out of all of the 3-offs of the monsters that we have, I would say he is the toughest to summon. So I would not suggest giving Jizukuru to your opponent because he does have 3300 attack. You don't really want to be giving that to your opponent. Next up, we're going to be running 2 Gamecill, the Sea Turtle Kaiju. In a Kaiju engine, this is by far the best Kaiju that we have. He's got the lowest attack, and yeah, you give your opponent a Gamecill, and you're ready to summon a Jizukuru right off the bat. Next up, we just run 1 Kamungus, the Sticky String Kaiju. You wanted another low attack Kaiju in this deck, and I think Kamungus works really well for that. Next up, we run Mataion the Timelord. He is a level 10. So it works well with making your Xyz plays and whatnot, although he does take up your normal summon, but you don't have to tribute to normal summon him. He can't be destroyed by battle or card effects, and at the end of the battle phase, if he had battled, meaning he was either attacked or he attacked himself, then shuffle all monsters on the field except this card back into the hand, or extra deck if they're extra deck monsters, and inflict 300 damage to your opponent for each monster sent back. So this is a great way to get rid of monsters without sending them to the graveyard, which could potentially activate a number of effects, like say in Thunder Dragons, for example, or yeah, just a variety of different effects that activate in the graveyard. It's essentially a second hand nowadays, so he's a really good way to kind of avoid all that, and also do a good amount of burn damage to your opponent. If you're going into time, then Metaion the Timelord, is a great option to kind of get that advantage right as time goes in. Same with our second Time Lord, Mickey on the Time Lord. Same effect as Metaion. He can't be destroyed by battle or card effects. You take no battle damage involving either of these cards. I forgot to mention about that. And all Time Lords do shuffle themselves back into the deck during the next standby phase after they were summoned. Mickey-on, sorry, I get all the Time Lords mixed up sometimes. He halves your opponent's life points at the end of the battle phase. If he battled, he halves your opponent's life points, which is a great way to get into OTK range with this deck, which is possible, but you might be grinding out a little bit with this deck, but it is very, very, very possible to OTK with this deck. Next up, we have a couple hand traps. We run one Effect Veiler, one Ghost Ogre, and one Ash Blossom. You don't want to run too many hand traps in this deck because you really just want to get straight into your plays, but having one of each of these hand traps is really nice. Effect Veiler obviously negates effects, Ghost Ogre can destroy monsters or spells when they activate their effects, and Ash Blossom, of course, it's Ash Blossom. We always want to have at least one of those for when we need it. So that's all for the monsters. Let's move on to the spell and traps here. The only 3 off for the spells that we're running is the field spell Revolving Switchyard. So its first effect is when a level 10 Earth Machine type monster is normal or special summoned, you can special summon a level 4 Earth Machine type monster from your deck, which would be Ruffian Railcar in this deck, and it becomes level 10, but you lose your battle phase that turn. The effect you're going to be using the most is you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. This isn't discarding, this is sending from hand to the grave. So if you have something like Dark Law on the field, I would not use that second effect because it will not go off. Because you're not discarding it, you're sending it to the grave, which means if it doesn't go to the grave, you don't get the effect. You send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard, and you can add 1 level 10 Earth Machine type monster from your deck to your hand. So your Night Express Knight or your Dare Crane, whichever one you need at that moment, is great to have. Obviously, we're going to be running 2 Terraforming here. You really want to get that field spell as quick as you possibly can. I may suggest even running Metaverse in this deck if you really think that you're not seeing the field spell that much. I do have it in my side deck, but personally, I don't like to run it in the main deck because it is a little slow. Next up, we run Soul Charge. This card is going to save your ass so many times. It's going to basically be an instant Xyz play. Really, really quickly. You always want to see this card. You do lose your battle phase, but it's really worth it with Soul Charge. It says saved my ass way too many times to not use. Next up, we run 1 Monster Reborn for the same reason. You want to have that just in case. We run 1 Regeki for mass removal, and it helps us with the OTK. And we run 1 Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. Because we're running so many Kaijus in this deck with Jizukiru, Gamecill, and Kamungus, this is a great way to get a Kaiju out on the field and to board clear. So when you activate this card, it destroys all special summon monsters on the field as possible. Then you can special summon 1 Kaiju monster to each side of the field. Usually you're going to want to give your opponent a Gamecill, and you want to give yourself a Jizukiru with this. We run 1 Special Schedule. When you activate this card, you can target a machine-type monster in your graveyard with 3,000 or more attack, special summon it in face-up defense position. You can only activate one Special Schedule once per turn, and if this set card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target a level 10 machine-type monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. Because this is a mostly machine deck, we're going to run 1 limiter removal. I might consider running 2, but the deck space in it is a little off for running 2, so I like to just run 1 just in case. All the monsters in this deck are extremely high attack in the first place, so you're not going to need to worry about not having enough attack too often. Next for the traps, we're going to run 3 Metal Reflect Slime. This is kind of a Paleozoic-esque trap. where when you activate it, you special summon it in defense position, and it has 3,000 attack, and it is a level 10. You can Exceed Summon with this monster because it's also considered a trap card. That specific ruling means that it is a monster card and also a trap card. So this card can be destroyed by Twin Twisters or MST or any spell and trap removal, even though it is treated as a monster card because it is also treated as a trap card. And the last card for the main deck, we're going to be running one Skill Drain. Skill Drain is great in this deck. A lot of your monsters kind of have hindrances because of the fact that you don't have to tribute to normal summon them. Knight Express Knight, for example, gets his original 3,000 attack when Skill Drain is on the field, and you can still normal summon him without tributing. And Heavy Freight Train Derek Crane does not lose his... he does not get his attack halved when he's on the field. And it also helps because your opponent's effects also are negated. It can be a little troublesome at sometimes, but for the most part, Skill Drain is no problem in your own deck. It's more of a problem for your opponents, and it can sometimes be a very, very tough effect on your opponent. So let's move on to the extra deck here. First off, we're going to be running 3 number 81 Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Super Dora. This is going to be your main Xyz monster that you're going to want to go into almost every time. So you will want to summon him in defense position, I would say a good 70 to 80% of the time. Unless you're really trying to just deal massive damage to your opponent right then and there. Usually you only want to do that to win the game. So you special summon in defense position, and his effect is that you can detach one Xyz material from him and target one target one monster on the field. This could be yours or your opponent's, depending on the strategy that you're going for at that moment. And that card is unaffected by card effects except for its own for the rest of the turn. Usually you're going to want to target Super Dora when you're using this. Although, if you have an opponent's monster that is necessary for them to interact with other cards on the field, you do have the option of targeting that card, and that card would be unaffected by all other cards' effects, so your opponent would not be able to interact with it. And that's all cards' effects except for its own. Next up, we're going to be running 3 Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Gustav Max. This is going to be your main burner. You detach one Xyz material and deal 2,000 damage to your opponent. A great play to use with this card is if your opponent only has one monster on the field and you Xyz summon this card with Knight Express Knight and Derek Crane, which is going to be most of the time. You're going to want to detach Derek Crane, burn them for 2,000 damage, and use Derek Crane's effect because he was detached to pop the one monster on the field and attack with Gustav Max. That's going to be around 5,000 points of damage during that one turn. So no complaining about that. This is also a great way to get into the OTK. It's a great way to finish off lingering opponents that just cannot seem to be attacked for some reason. So yeah. Next up, we're going to be running 2 number 35 Ravenous Tarantula, 2 number 84 Pain Gainer, and 2 number 77 the Seven Sins. These monsters overlay into each other, kind of like the Galaxy Eyes Xyz monsters do. Ravenous Tarantula, all monsters on the field gain attack and defense equal to the difference between your opponent's life points and yours. Number 84, Pain Gainer, I don't really use him too much, personally. He gains defense equal to the combined ranks of all Xyz monsters you control, times 200, and while it has Xyz material, each time your opponent activates a spell and trap, inflicts 600 damage to your opponent immediately after resolves. You can also detach Xyz material from it to destroy all face-up monsters your opponent controls with defense equal to or less than this opponent's, or this card's. And number 77, the Seven Sins, you can Xyz summon him, so you want to go Ravenous Tarantula, overlay into Pain Gainer, overlay into Seven Sins. Just like that. If summoned this way, the following effect cannot be activated this turn. Once per turn, you can detach 2 Xyz materials from this card, banish as many special summon monsters your opponent controls as possible, then attach one of those banished monsters to this card as Xyz material. If this face-up card on the field would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can detach an Xyz material from this card instead. So these monsters can be extremely powerful. You don't go into them too much because of Master Rule 4. Back when this deck was in its heyday, you would usually go into either Super Dora or Gustav Max, and then you would also overlay in your second monster zone to one of to 7 cents. Next up and last for the Xyz monsters, we're going to be running one Super Dimensional Robot Galaxy Destroyer. You can detach one Xyz material from this card, and it destroys all spell and traps your opponent controls, and they cannot respond to it with spells or traps. So no solemn warnings, no solemn judgments, none of that. They can still respond with monster effects, but they cannot respond with spell or trap effects. And this works also very well with Derricrane. It does take 3 level 10 monsters to summon, so this one is a little harder to summon, but it is very much, in my opinion, worth that. And then lastly, for the extra deck, because we run Malefic Cyber End Dragon, we do have to banish a Cyber End Dragon from our extra deck to summon him. I personally only run 2 in the extra deck, because that is the only room that I have for them, but also because I do want to see Malefic Cyber End Dragon quite a lot, which is why I run 3 of him, but I'm not going to be summoning him as my main playmaker, so I do only have 2 Cyber End Dragons in my extra deck. So that's going to be all for this deck profile. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. If you have any card suggestions for this deck as well, please let me know in the comments. And yeah, happy Halloween, everybody. I hope you guys enjoy your day. Peace out.